Hi, I'm Maura. Ever given everything you had to family, only to watch them rewrite the story without you in it? I used $1 million of my own savings to rescue my parents' company. I thought that meant I mattered. I thought it meant I belonged. But then, I found out I was cut from the will, not reduced, erased. Worse, my dad still asked for more. And what they did next, how they twisted my name, my past, even dragged in the man I once loved. How do you fight a family that built its power on your silence? And what happens when you finally speak? Let me tell you what happened to me. The scent of rosemary hit me the moment I stepped onto the porch. Mom was in the backyard, kneeling by her herb garden, her sun hat tilted low over her brow like she was pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. I hadn't planned to stay long, just drop off a stack of tax files I'd helped organize for their business. It was a quiet Wednesday morning, and I had calls lined up with 2 corporate clients later that afternoon. "Maura," she called without looking up. "Be a dear and check the safe in the den. Your dad needs something for the CPA. Something about last year's deductions." I nodded, brushing invisible dust off my blazer. Sure. Inside, the house looked almost identical to how it did 20 years ago. Same peach walls, same framed needlepoints, same sound of my dad's voice carrying from the study, deep and practiced, as if he was still trying to impress someone. I passed by the French doors and gave him a polite wave. He didn't look up, too engrossed in whatever video meeting he was hosting. I headed straight to the den, kneeling in front of the built-in cabinet where they kept the safe. The keypad hadn't changed either. 0419, Darla's birthday. Once inside, I pulled out the usual stack. Warranty papers, insurance docs, a few old checkbooks. But one folder stood out. Burgundy leatherette, stamped estate plan, in gold. I hesitated. I didn't open it out of curiosity. At least, that's what I told myself later. I just wanted to make sure they hadn't forgotten to sign something important. But by page 3, my stomach tightened. It wasn't the legal jargon that rattled me. It was the clear and deliberate absence. My name didn't appear. Not under real estate assets, not under business succession, not under personal items. Every line, house, company shares, savings, even Mom's antique ring collection, was assigned to one name, Darla Ann Whitmore. Not a single mention of me, not even a token percentage, just a general statement in the final paragraph. We love both our daughters and trust they will understand our intentions. My jaw locked, my pulse thudded in my ears. The door creaked behind me. Mom walked in, carrying a small watering can, eyes flicking toward the open folder in my hands. She paused, feigning a casual smile. "Oh, that," she said lightly, brushing dirt from her fingers. "You know your father thought it was best this way. You're doing well, Maura. Darla, she still needs support." I closed the folder, the weight of it like bricks in my hands. "So doing well means I'm not family anymore?" She blinked, as if the question itself was rude. "Don't be dramatic, you know what I mean?" "I actually don't." Dad appeared then, stepping in like it was all perfectly timed. No knock, no pause. Just that damn mug of coffee he always carried like it made him important. "Sweetheart," he said, like he was trying to calm a client. "There's no need for this tone. You're stable. You've built your own life. Darla's still figuring things out." I laughed, sharp, short, without humor. "She's 37, still bounces between projects, still doesn't pay her credit card bill on time, still thinks being an influencer is a career plan. But sure, let's hand her everything." Dad frowned, voice lowering. "That's not fair." I stood up slowly. "You're right, it's not. What's unfair is me covering payroll back in 2019 so you didn't have to declare bankruptcy. What's unfair is me pulling $1 million from my own portfolio so this house, this business, could stay afloat while she was off doing yoga retreats in Sedona." Mom placed a hand on my forearm. "We just want her to feel secure." "And me? You're already secure." There it was, final, clean, convenient. I looked between them. Neither said another word, not a flicker of regret in their expressions. I slid the folder back into the safe and locked it. "If I'm not worthy of your legacy, don't expect me to keep cleaning up your mistakes." I turned without another word and walked out, past the garden, past the familiar creak of the wooden porch step, past the damn rosemary. No one followed. I sat in my car for a long while, gripping the steering wheel. Not angry, not yet, just hollow, like someone had opened me up and removed something essential. Not grief, not sadness, just a void. A void with names I thought I could still trust. The air in my car was still, thick like wool. I hadn't started the engine yet. Instead, I sat motionless, my hands still resting on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the windshield, though I wasn't really seeing anything. The whole world outside blurred into the lines of my own reflection, faint, quiet, hollow. I didn't drive straight home. I took the long way, past downtown, circled the lake twice, then pulled into the parking lot of a quiet coffee shop I used to visit years ago when I was still paying down my grad school debt. Back when life felt like a climb, not a betrayal. I grabbed a seat in the far corner, back against the wall, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my saved files until I found the folder marked 2019 Emergency Transfers. The timestamp on the first wire, October 2nd, 2019, $400,000, followed by another 3 transactions over the next month. Altogether, $1 million drained from accounts I'd built with my own sweat and sleepless nights. My chest ached, not with regret, but with recognition. That money had kept their company alive. That sacrifice had kept their home from foreclosure. And now, I was the one written out. 5 years ago, everything unraveled at once. I still remember Dad calling me at 6:13 a.m., voice shaking for the first time I could recall. "Maura, the Canyon Ridge project, it's falling apart. The investors are threatening a lawsuit. We're not going to make payroll." I'd just landed a new client, had a second-round interview with a firm in Seattle, and was considering moving in with Ryan, my boyfriend at the time. Instead, I flew to Austin that night. I skipped the Seattle trip. I met with the family's accountant. I pored over spreadsheets for 72 hours straight and realized that without immediate funding, the company would collapse by the end of the quarter. Darla, of course, was nowhere to be found. When I asked Mom about her, she said Darla had gone off-grid for a yoga cleanse retreat in Arizona. "She's too fragile right now," Mom whispered. "This kind of stress breaks her." And me? I wasn't allowed to break. I cashed out half my portfolio, took the tax hit, and transferred the first amount within a week. The second followed 10 days later. Dad promised everything would be repaid. "You'll be on the board, full ownership stake. We'll rewrite everything. You have my word, sweetheart." I didn't ask for a contract. That's the part that keeps haunting me. I trusted them. Not because they were good with their word, but because they were my parents. Because I believed family didn't need paperwork. I stayed for 3 more months, helping them restructure debt, freeze unnecessary spending, and settle with the Canyon Ridge lawsuit. We survived the collapse, but I was never added to the board. And the will? Well, now I knew exactly where I stood. Back then, Mom hugged me in the kitchen, tight and tearful. "We'll never forget what you did for us," she said. Turns out they forgot faster than I could have imagined. I left the coffee shop just before sundown. I couldn't sit still anymore. On the drive home, I passed the intersection where Ryan had once waited for me with flowers and 2 one-way tickets to Seattle. I told him I needed more time, that my family needed me. 3 months later, he was gone. He didn't leave because I said no. He left because he saw what I didn't. I wasn't just helping my family. I was being consumed by them. Used, quietly and efficiently, like a line of credit they never planned to pay off. Back at my apartment, I dropped my purse on the chair and walked straight to my home office. I opened my laptop, logged into my secure storage, and pulled every email, every transfer confirmation, every contract I drafted for them. I created a new folder on my desktop, named it Proof, just in case. I clicked and dragged the files one by one. The confirmation codes, the scanned checks, the email from Dad with the subject line, "Urgent cash injection needed, trust you." I stopped at one final file, a voice memo I'd saved without telling anyone. It was a recording of a call from November 2019. I hit play. Dad's voice crackled through the speaker. "Don't worry, Maura. When the dust settles, you'll have just as much claim to this company as Darla. Hell, probably more. We know who really saved it." I stared at the screen. My own voice in that clip sounded hopeful. I clicked save, backed it all up to the cloud, then again to a separate flash drive I kept in my locked drawer. This time, I wasn't going to beg for acknowledgement. I wasn't going to ask for fairness or chase validation from people who saw me only as a resource. I stood up from the desk, my fingers trailing the edge of the wooden surface. "This time," I whispered, "I won't be silent." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. By the time the sky outside dimmed into that soft orange haze only early spring in Texas could paint, I was already knee-deep in spreadsheets. I hadn't eaten dinner. I barely remembered making coffee, but once the adrenaline set in, I didn't need anything else. I logged into the old shared accounting portal, the one I used to access when I helped clean up the books during the Canyon Ridge collapse. Dad had never changed the credentials, probably didn't remember they were still active. The dashboard took a minute to load, and as I waited, I tapped my fingers against the desk, each beat steady like a countdown. When it finally opened, I scanned for the quarter ending December 2019. Everything looked clean. Too clean. That's the thing about cooked numbers. They're never messy. They're symmetrical, tidy, convenient. I opened the general ledger, cross-referenced expense accounts, and paused at a line item labeled Consulting External Services. It had never shown up in the summaries I reviewed before. $22,500 paid monthly like clockwork. I dug deeper. The payment started in late 2018 and ran through mid-2021. Each invoice tied to a Nevada-based firm I'd never heard of, Cornell Strategic Holdings. It rang zero bells. No website, no LinkedIn presence, but something about the name scratched at the edges of my memory. I opened the invoice attachments and saw generic service descriptions: operational planning, digital transformation oversight, confidential advisement, corporate buzzwords for nothing. I traced the bank transfers, all routed through intermediary accounts, and eventually landing in a holding company based out of Reno. I cross-checked the filing documents through a public records site, and then I froze. Owner: Denton Graves. The cursor hovered for a moment like even the computer wasn't sure what to do next. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my breath. Denton wasn't just some shadow name. He was my ex. My ex who used to work as the firm's in-house financial analyst. My ex who I trusted enough to give login access to when he was helping consolidate vendor contracts. The same man who sat across from me 3 Christmases ago and told me I was too loyal for my own good. Now his name was on invoices I never approved, listed as the beneficiary of funds that were rerouted while I was hemorrhaging my own savings, trying to save a company that had already been gutted from the inside. I wasn't stupid. This wasn't just bad judgment. This was collusion. He and Darla had been covering for each other. The timeline was too clean. The withdrawals matched the very weeks I was authorizing wire transfers into the business account. While I was patching holes, they were drilling more beneath my feet. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal. It was coordinated, and it had a signature. I pulled open my drawer and yanked out a yellow legal pad. I started building a timeline. October 2018, first transfer to Cornell. January 2019, Denton travels to Vegas for a conference. March 2019, Darla is sick, skips 3 board meetings. June 2019, I pay the firm's outstanding $180K debt. By the end of the night, I had over $480,000 in routed payments accounted for. Every one of them tucked neatly under Darla's authorization, with Leonard co-signing as CEO. It wasn't negligence. It was fraud hidden under the guise of family. I stared at the name one more time. Denton Graves. The man who once told me, "You're the only one who really gets how money works." Guess I wasn't the only one after all. Around midnight, I exported every document into a single PDF, encrypted it, and emailed a backup to myself. Then I copied the file to the same flash drive in my desk. I sat there in silence, my eyes burning from the screen, but my mind clear. I hadn't wanted a war. I hadn't gone looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to let them bury me under a lie they'd all built together. I picked up my phone and stared at the contact list. I scrolled past family, past old friends, until I landed on a name I hadn't called in years: Clara Voss. Back when I did legal work for the Finley Group, Clara had been our most ruthless compliance advisor. Smart, discreet, relentless. If anyone could help me unravel this mess and do it surgically, it was her. I didn't press call, not yet. But I saved the number to my favorites, because now I wasn't just gathering receipts. I was tracing rot. And I'd found where it started. The fraud didn't begin with some bad deal or market downturn. It began when family stopped treating me like one of their own. The following evening, just as I'd started closing out the day's work and reviewing Clara's initial reply, short, sharp, and requesting a full evidence dump, the phone buzzed. I stared at the screen a second too long. Mom. For a moment, I debated letting it ring out. I didn't owe her anything, not even my time, but something in me wanted to hear what excuse she'd come up with now. I tapped accept and waited for her voice. "Hi, honey," she said, soft and sweet like nothing had happened. I didn't answer. She cleared her throat. "I hate to call like this, I really do, but something's come up. We're short on one of our supplier payments. It's just $6,000. If we miss it, it delays the shipment for 2 weeks, and we've already been skating on thin ice with this contractor." I blinked. "Just $6,000? My voice came out colder than I intended. "Ask Darla." There was a pause, then a breathy, uncomfortable laugh. She's a little overwhelmed right now. Too much on her plate. You know how she gets." "No," I snapped. "I don't, because I was also overwhelmed. When I pulled $1 million out of my accounts to cover the payroll you failed to manage. When I worked overnight to prevent your doors from being padlocked by the state. But you didn't seem worried about how I get." "Maura, please don't bring up old stuff," she said quickly. "You always make everything so heavy. We're asking for help, that's all. As family." That word again. Family. Their favorite shield. "I'm not your emergency fund anymore," I said. "You made that perfectly clear when you cut me out of your will and handed everything to someone who can't manage a grocery list without texting you 3 times. There was a sharp inhale on her end. "That's not fair." "You're right," I cut her off. "None of this is fair. But it's the truth." And before she could wind into another guilt-laced monologue, I hung up. My heart was thudding so loud it felt like it echoed through my jaw. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then I went back to my desk, clicked open my encrypted folder, and added a new document. Call log Charlene, requesting funds, March 23rd. I wasn't playing nice anymore. I was documenting. The next morning, I brewed my coffee early, even before checking the news feed. An alert pinged on my phone. New message, group thread. I opened it, instantly recognizing Leonard's passive-aggressive signature at the bottom. The subject line, "Family shouldn't break over misunderstandings." The message wasn't long, but every word was carefully crafted like a PR statement, masked as an olive branch. It pains me to see how fractured things have become. We all make mistakes. But letting one misunderstanding unravel years of love, support, and hard work, that's not how family endures. Let's come back together. Let's talk without judgment. Buried between the lines wasn't regret. It was manipulation. There was no mention of Darla, no mention of the will, no mention of the 6-figure theft or the fact that they'd chosen to delete me from the future they built with money I'd handed over. Just that tone I'd come to recognize like the hum of a broken light bulb, emotional blackmail masquerading as peacekeeping. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the entire email, headers, timestamps, all of it, to Clara. My accompanying note was brief. This is how they've always cleaned up their mess, with guilt and nice words. I sat on my couch afterward, laptop balanced on my knees. For once, I didn't feel shaky. I didn't second guess. I didn't wonder if I was being too harsh or acting too fast. They weren't reaching out to apologize. They weren't asking what I needed. They were pressing to maintain control. Keep the narrative soft. Keep me quiet. I pulled out a fresh page from my journal, one I hadn't opened in months, and wrote across the top in black pen. March 24th, the day I stopped explaining myself. Below that, I began listing, not dollar amounts, but things they still owed me. Respect, honesty, accountability. My name on the company board. An apology that actually sounds like one. My father admitting he knew what Denton was doing. My mother telling Darla to carry her own weight for once. Space, silence, distance. When I got to the 10th line, I stopped. Not because the list was complete, but because the anger had finally settled into clarity. They weren't asking for help. They were testing the waters, seeing if I'd softened, seeing if I'd forget. I muttered aloud, pen still in hand. They were warned. And then, quietly but firmly, as if saying it aloud made it law. This isn't silence. It's patience. By Friday morning, my list sat untouched on the kitchen counter. I hadn't added to it. I didn't need to. The silence from my family in the days since Mom's favor call had already told me everything. At 9:47 a.m., my laptop pinged. A calendar notification popped up on the screen. Board status review urgent, sent by Darla Whitmore. No greeting, no explanation. Just a cold block of text with a Zoom link and a time, 10:30 sharp. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to ignore it. But curiosity got the better of me. They weren't done. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. And I was done being caught off guard. By 10:25, I had my laptop docked and screen shared. I joined with camera off, mic muted. The digital boardroom lit up with familiar faces. Leonard, seated in the corner of his office, arms crossed like a disinterested judge. Two external board members, Rhonda Stone and Alan Cho, both stiff and unreadable. And finally, Darla, lips glossed and composed like she was prepping for a TED Talk. Thanks everyone for joining on short notice, Darla began, voice smooth and managerial. We're here to quickly address some of the Q1 inconsistencies and highlight areas of concern moving forward. I stayed silent, waiting. She clicked to a slide that read, 2019-2020, Legacy, Financial Data, Gaps, and Risk. We've encountered discrepancies in our historical reports, she continued, specifically in the expense filings during the restructuring period. Some entries remain unclassified, and others were filed without supporting memos or a consistent categorization. Unfortunately, these records date back to when outside support was managing our books. She didn't say my name, but her eyes flicked to the camera, and everyone knew who she meant. Leonard leaned forward slightly. Just to clarify, that period was during the time Maura was assisting pro bono, yes? Rhonda's lips tightened. Alan simply nodded. The implication was clear. I had made the mess. I had jeopardized the company's current status. I unmuted my mic and clicked my camera on. Darla's eyes widened for half a beat. Hi, I said coolly. Before we go further into hypotheticals and historical distortion, would anyone like to see the receipts? No one replied. I clicked to share my screen. A folder labeled Cornell Transfers Confirmed opened. Line by line, PDF by PDF, I walked them through the consulting invoices, the authorized payments, the co-signed approvals, all dated, signed, and verifiable. I zoomed in on one particularly damning entry. March 7th, 2020, I said. $17,400 routed through Cornell Strategic Holdings, authorized by Darla Whitmore, with Leonard Whitmore copied on the final bank instruction. Silence. And for clarity's sake, I continued, you will not find my name, my login, or my approval on any of these. I was not acting as your CFO. I was your emergency donor. Leonard shifted in his chair. Darla's mouth opened, then shut again. I ended the share screen and folded my arms, implying I was responsible for poor financial handling, when in reality I funded the recovery while others rerouted company funds through ghost entities. Well, that's slander. And worse, it's stupid. Rhonda finally cleared her throat. Maura, if you feel there's been a misunderstanding— Oh, I don't, I said. I think I see everything perfectly now. I left the call. Clean break, no goodbye. 15 minutes later, I composed an email. Subject, defamation boundaries to all board members. Please consider this official notice. Any further implication of my involvement in mismanaged funds or misrepresented accounts during my voluntary support period will result in legal proceedings. I have records of every transaction, including those that occurred without my knowledge but under your oversight. Govern yourselves accordingly. Maura Whitmore. I CC'd Clara. Attached the same file set I'd shown on screen. Then I closed my laptop and leaned back. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't second-guessing. I didn't wonder what they'd think of me, because this wasn't about being liked. This was about drawing the line, publicly, sharply, and with no room for confusion. They had poked the wrong ghost. I didn't sleep much that weekend, not because I was nervous, but because I was focused. Saturday night, I turned my living room into a war room. Financial printouts covered the coffee table. My laptop screen glowed under dim lighting, tabs open across records, audio files, and one blank browser window just waiting to be used. At 2:14 a.m., I created a new Medium account under the name W. Whitmore Anonymous. The title came to me without hesitation: How $1 million Bought Silence in a Family That Still Wanted More. I didn't hold back. I wrote everything: clean, chronological, factual. I included transaction records, time-stamped emails, and a redacted scan of the will that excluded me. I even uploaded a screenshot of the transfer to Cornell Holdings, highlighting Darla's digital signature and Leonard's final approval stamp. No opinions, just truth, cold and organized. The final line of the post read, "This isn't revenge, this is record-keeping, because if your name is going to be erased, at least let it echo before it disappears." I hit publish at 4:37 a.m., then walked outside barefoot and stood under the stars for 5 full minutes. By the time I woke up late Sunday morning, my phone had exploded. Hundreds of views, thousands of reads. Then local buzz. A legal forum on Reddit picked it up. Then a few former firm employees shared the link. The hashtags started rolling in by Sunday afternoon. #family-fraud, #whistleblown by blood, #she paid they played. I didn't say a word. Didn't post a follow-up. Didn't comment. But my inbox filled quickly. We always suspected Darla was funneling money, but no one wanted to accuse Leonard's daughter. I left that company in 2020 after my paycheck bounced. You saved them, Maura. You deserve better. I'm proud of you. You're saying what so many of us were too scared to. It was surreal, being believed in public when I hadn't even been acknowledged in private. But the best part wasn't the support, it was the panic on the other side. By Monday morning, a cease and desist letter arrived in my inbox, drafted hastily, addressed formally, and signed, predictably, by Leonard. It was a joke, barely veiled behind legal language. Words like libel, reputational harm, and private family affairs thrown around as if truth could be copyrighted. I sent it to Clara. Her response came in 3 words: "Let them try." Darla, meanwhile, took a more performative approach. She posted a filtered selfie on Instagram, captioned with something vague like, "Cutting ties with toxic energy is self-care." And then, in the comments, "Family isn't always blood, sometimes it's trauma." It had all the emotional range of a pre-printed greeting card, but it played well with her influencer following. A few of her yoga friends commented with heart emojis and, "Stay strong, queen." It was laughable. And then Mom called. I ignored the first attempt, and the second. But by the 3rd call that evening, I picked up, not because I owed her the grace, but because I wanted to hear what version of the story she was spinning now. "Maura," her voice cracked as if she'd been crying or trying to sound like she had. "Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes," I replied. "Do you?" "We can't survive this," she whispered. "Your father's blood pressure has been sky high. He's not sleeping. Darla's barely holding it together." "And I was supposed to?" I asked. "When I was draining my savings to keep the business afloat? When you erased me from your will?" "This isn't how families fix things." "No," I said flatly. "It's how families bury things. And I'm done being the dirt you shovel over it." She went silent. Then that old line. "Think about your father's health, Maura. You know how stress affects him." I almost laughed. If he cared about his health, maybe he shouldn't have spent years co-signing theft while watching me work double shifts to cover his mistakes. I hung up without waiting for a reply. That night, I backed everything up to a legal archive system Clara recommended. I uploaded every document, every call recording, and even a few old board presentations with Darla's initials plastered across line items she now claimed ignorance about. Then I sent the entire file package to Open Matter, a nonprofit media watchdog I'd followed since college. It wasn't a leak, it was accountability. Truth with timestamps. The email I attached read, "You're welcome to vet every page. This isn't a family squabble. It's a financial shell game built on the back of someone they tried to erase." I ended with a quote I'd written in my notes weeks earlier. "If they want war, I want it documented. I turned off the lights, shut my laptop, and let silence settle over the room. But this time, it wasn't the silence of surrender. It was the calm before the next reckoning. 2 days after I published the post, they struck. I was standing in line at a small grocery store, grabbing coffee and protein bars, when my phone buzzed with a text from Talia, an old colleague from the Finley group. "Maura, just heard Leonard on the Ledger Hour podcast. You need to listen. Like, now." I froze. Back in my car, I pulled up the episode. The host introduced Leonard like he was some kind of weathered hero, a longtime businessman navigating family challenges with grace. Then Leonard's voice came on, soft, composed, grandfatherly. "There's been a lot of noise lately," he said. "Unfortunately, some people with unresolved issues and fragile emotional states have chosen to distort our family's story." He never said my name. He didn't have to. The host chuckled. "That sounds incredibly difficult, especially with someone close." Leonard's response? "We love her. We've always tried to support her. But sometimes, no matter how much you give, it's never enough for someone who carries unresolved pain." I nearly dropped my phone. Backhanded, strategic, and absolutely disgusting. Later that afternoon, Darla decided to play her part too. On Instagram, she uploaded a string of story slides, all in muted beige tones with soft piano music playing. "The hardest part of trauma," she wrote, "is when the person who causes it insists they're the victim. Screenshots can be edited. Motives matter. Mental illness is real. Be kind." She even added a poll. "Should I speak my truth?" With the options, yes, protect your peace, and no, stay classy. It was cartoonish, but I knew her followers wouldn't care about facts. They cared about vibes. And Darla, as always, knew how to curate a vibe. Still, I could have brushed it off if it had ended there. But then came the worst blow. Denton. He and I hadn't spoken in years, not since we split after I refused to co-sign a real estate deal he called visionary and I called financial suicide. We hadn't even crossed paths in court, though I knew he was still doing accounting work, mostly consulting now. But that day, he posted a public message on LinkedIn of all places. When family matters spill into public view, it's painful for everyone, especially when narratives are shaped by personal grievances, not facts. I worked closely with the Whitmore firm for years. Darla is one of the most transparent, resilient professionals I've met. Accusations floating around now are deeply skewed and ignore key context. Then the kicker. As someone who has seen both sides, I can say some parties may be struggling with unresolved conflicts and projection. I hope they get the help they need. Projection? Help. He was saying I was unstable. Coming from the man who helped launder nearly $500,000, it was almost comedic. But I wasn't laughing. I sat at my kitchen table, heart slamming against my ribs, rereading his post while rage simmered so hot I could barely think. My phone buzzed again, another message from a former co-worker. "Saw what Denton posted. I'm so sorry. He always played both sides. We believe you." But belief didn't fix the betrayal. I stood up too fast, the chair scraping across the tile floor, and grabbed the nearest plate from the drying rack. It shattered against the kitchen wall before I even realized I'd thrown it. Shards sparkled in the evening light, scattered across the tile like pieces of the person I used to be. Quiet, composed, careful. Not anymore. I pressed my forehead against the fridge and closed my eyes. The weight was real now, not just emotional, but reputational. They weren't just trying to discredit my story, they were trying to burn down everything I'd built to tell it. But life, funny enough, knows when to throw a curveball back. Because that same night, at 11:42 p.m., a message arrived in my inbox from a Gmail I didn't recognize. Subject, payroll ghosting Whitmore files. No greeting, no sign-off, just one sentence. Check Darla's signature on the 2019 Q4 payroll entries, compare to Denton's. You'll find they signed off on hours billed to employees who didn't exist. Attached, 6 PDF files. Payroll summaries, fake names, time cards logged by contractors with no social security numbers. All tied to accounts funneled through the very same Nevada holding firm. The sender remained anonymous, but the metadata was clean. Someone on the inside. Someone who had seen it all and finally snapped. I downloaded every file and dropped them into the legal folder Clara and I had been building. Then I opened a video call with her. When her face popped up, I didn't say hello. I said, "They faked payroll. They used ghost employees." Her lips parted in silence. I continued, "I have the documents, all of it, with signatures." She nodded slowly. "Maura, this changes everything." I looked at myself in the tiny video square. Hair messy, eyes bloodshot, a healing cut from where I'd grazed my hand on broken porcelain. But my voice? Steady, low, final. "They wanted a war," I said. "Now it's official." The following morning, sunlight filtered through the kitchen blinds like it hadn't dared do all weekend. I sat with black coffee, no milk, no sugar, just the bitterness I needed to match the task ahead. Clara met me at her downtown office, her heels clicking like a gavel against the marble floor. She didn't smile when she saw me. She didn't need to. We reviewed everything: emails, bank records, that whistleblower PDF dump. She flagged 3 areas immediately: fraud, negligence, and defamation. Then she pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the table toward me. "This is the motion," she said. "Once you sign, we're all in." My fingers hovered over the pen. I wasn't scared. I wasn't hesitant. I was tired of fighting invisible wars. I signed. By noon, the formal complaint was filed with the District Civil Court. Maura Whitmore versus Whitmore Construction Inc. and associated board members. We submitted the whistleblower files to the state attorney's office. Clara had connections. They didn't go unnoticed. 3 days later, subpoenas were issued to Darla and Leonard. The IRS opened an inquiry into the firm's past 3 years of tax returns. I received an email from Clyde, the former operations director who resigned quietly last year, saying he'd seen discrepancies in payroll back in 2020. He attached a sworn statement, notarized and time-stamped. He ended it with, "I'm sorry it took me this long." By Friday, it hit the news. I didn't speak to the press right away. I let the filings speak first. Then came the pre-recorded interview with KTEX News. The studio lights were hot, the camera guy smelled like cheap cologne, and the producer asked me 3 times if I was sure I wanted to go on record against my own family. I said, they stopped being family when they turned my loyalty into liability. When the camera rolled, I kept my voice measured, my hands still. "White-collar crime thrives in silence," I said, "especially when it's protected by family names and Sunday dinners. But silence is not the same as peace. And some of us paid too high a price just to keep the lights on." The interview aired that night at 8 p.m. sharp. It was shared 6,000 times within the hour. That weekend, reporters parked outside my building. I ignored them. Former employees started emailing me, people who had been laid off, bullied, written up for imaginary mistakes. One wrote, "We always wondered why Darla got promoted so fast." Another said, "They told us you'd abandoned the company. Glad to know the truth." On Monday morning, Judge Elena Ruiz issued an emergency freeze on the firm's primary assets. No transfers, no bonuses, no golden parachutes. That same hour, Darla was suspended from her executive role pending review. Leonard posted bail on an unrelated tax evasion charge. He left the courthouse wearing sunglasses and a golf hat like it was a game. But I wasn't playing anymore. As I walked up the courthouse steps for my deposition, they were coming down. Leonard didn't look at me. Darla tried to. She opened her mouth like she had something rehearsed. I didn't stop to hear it. I walked past them like I'd never met them. Not because I hated them, but because they made the choice to treat me like a stranger. And I finally believed them. That evening, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the wind push the clouds westward. It was quiet, not hollow this time, just clean. I opened my laptop and began drafting a formal victim impact statement, not because I needed pity, but because the truth needed a record. They built that house with stolen bricks. Now it's crumbling, and I won't be there to save it. 1 month later, the dust had stopped swirling, but the air never quite settled. The court order held. Leonard officially resigned from all corporate roles, citing health concerns, though everyone knew it was an audit breathing down his neck, not a doctor's report. His name vanished from the website, from the press releases, from the firm's letterhead, but not from my memory. That stain runs deep. Darla, on the other hand, just disappeared. No statement, no apology, not even a goodbye post. Her influencer accounts went dark. Last I heard, she booked a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. Probably thought she could namaste her way out of accountability. And then there was Charlene. The envelope was cream-colored. No return address. Handwritten. I knew the loops of her cursive before I even opened it. But I didn't. I slid it into my drawer, right next to the medical receipts I'd covered for Dad's heart medications, and the tuition invoice I once paid so Darla could finish her entrepreneurial development course. Reconciliation in cursive meant nothing without accountability in ink. I had no intention of feeding that illusion again. Instead, I put my time where it could matter, where silence hadn't taken root like rot. I started something new, small, focused, an advisory group for professionals like me, people burned by family-run companies, people who gave too much and got labeled ungrateful for daring to want boundaries. The first meeting had 4 of us. By the third, we were 23, and then came the invite that stopped me cold. TEDx Texas, would you be interested in sharing your story? At first, I stared at the email like it had landed in the wrong inbox. Me? Talk about this? Publicly? But then I remembered the silence that tried to strangle me, and how close it had come to winning. So I said yes. The event was held in a repurposed school auditorium in San Marcos. Nothing flashy, folding chairs, chalkboard signs. But when I stepped on stage, under that single warm light, something cracked loose inside me. The talk was called, "When Your Family Becomes the Fraud." I didn't rehearse it like a TED veteran. I told it like a witness, like someone who had clawed her way out of a fire others insisted didn't exist. Afterward, a man in his 50s came up to me, red tie, trembling hands. He introduced himself as Clyde. "The operations director?" I asked. He nodded. His eyes shined but didn't spill. "I stayed quiet too long," he said. "But you said what so many of us couldn't." I shook his hand. "You gave your statement when it counted. You still showed up." We stood there in silence. But it wasn't hollow this time. It was full, with understanding, maybe even peace. Weeks passed. Life began to take shape again. I wasn't rebuilding. I was building something different. And then, one morning, while scrolling for apartments to help a friend relocate, I saw it. My childhood home, listed for sale. The listing described it as charming but in need of care. The photos showed cracked gutters, overgrown ivy, a front porch leaning a little too far forward, like it knew it had nothing left to hold up. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel victorious. I felt done. "They built it with money I gave them," I whispered, "and lost it without me." I closed the tab. That chapter wasn't mine anymore. Instead, I found my place in a park, on a mild spring afternoon, holding a DSLR camera that wasn't even mine. A local high school had asked for community volunteers to help their students with an art project. I had no formal training, just a steady hand and an eye for clarity. A group of teens fumbled with lighting and focus. One kid dropped his lens cap for the 3rd time. "Guess I'm not cut out for photography," he muttered. I grinned. "Everyone starts off blurry. It's what you do next that sharpens the picture." He laughed, embarrassed but warmed, and then his friend handed me a camera that had glitched mid-shot. I took it gently, tapped twice near the shutter, and smiled when it blinked back to life. Sometimes the damage just needs attention, not repair, not reversal, just acknowledgement that it happened. I framed the next shot, angled toward the light. This wasn't the life I thought I'd have. No Sunday dinners, no inheritance, no phone calls from parents asking how my day went. But for the first time, it felt like mine. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I finally chose myself. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. Not every apology will come. Not every family story ends with a group hug or a shared holiday meal. And that's okay. What I learned through all of this, through the lies, the silence, the unraveling, is that self-respect is not selfish. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold. And choosing peace over dysfunction, that's not betrayal. That's growth. Maybe you've been in my shoes. Maybe your scars aren't financial but emotional. Words that cut, loyalties broken, trust that never came back. If that's you, I see you. You're not alone. And no matter how loud the world gets, I hope you always protect your peace louder. If this story hit close to home, or even just made you think differently, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a 1 in the comments if any part of this spoke to your heart. Or tell me what city or state you're watching from. I read every message. And hey, if this kind of honest human story is something you value, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories coming. Stories about love, loss, truth, and everything we learn in the in-between. This is Mora. Thanks for walking with me. Until next time.